Tunde, the son of a powerful Nigerian politician, had spent the last 18 years living a life of luxury in the UK. Now, he was finally back in Nigeria, ready to take over his father's vast empire of businesses. As his security aides unloaded his luggage from the sleek black SUV, Tunde couldn't contain his excitement. The air smelled of nostalgia and opportunity, and he was eager to reclaim his place in the world he had left behind. Standing among the entourage that had come to welcome him was Dosun, his childhood friend. Tunde clapped Dosun on the shoulder, his face lit up with joy. 18 years, my brother. Look at you. You've grown into a man. I can't wait for you to show me everything I've missed. I've heard this town is full of mysteries and beautiful women. Tonight, we explore. Dosun smiled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the two friends climbed into Tunde's sports car and sped off into the neon-lit streets of the city. They arrived at a bustling nightclub where the air was thick with the scent of alcohol and sweat. The bass from the music thumped through the floor, and bodies moved in sync under the strobe lights. Tunde and Dosun sat at the bar, sipping expensive whiskey as they watched the crowd. After a few drinks, Dosun leaned in close, his voice low. "There's a place I want to show you," he said. "A secret spot known only to a few. You'll thank me later." Tunde's eyes sparkled with anticipation. "This is what I've been waiting for. Let's go." They left the club and drove through the winding streets until they arrived at a dimly lit building tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. A sign above the door read, "Pleasure Den." Tunde raised an eyebrow but said nothing. As they stepped out of the car, a woman walked past them, her silhouette outlined by the faint glow of the streetlights. She was breathtaking, her movements graceful, her presence magnetic. Tunde's heart skipped a beat. "That woman," he whispered, his voice trembling with desire. "She's mine tonight. I'll do whatever it takes to have her." Dosun grabbed his arm, his grip firm. "Calm down, Tunde. There are plenty of women here, but remember, they're all Oloshos. But be careful. Not everything here is as it seems." Tunde waved him off, his eyes fixed on the woman. "I don't care. She's all I want." Inside the pleasure den, the atmosphere was electric. The woman Tunde had seen outside was now on the stage, dancing with a hypnotic grace. Her movements were fluid, almost otherworldly, and Tunde was entranced. He pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on her. "You're all I want," he declared, his voice filled with passion. "I'll never let you go. In this temple, I'll build my castle and raise my kingdom." The woman turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You don't know me," she said softly. "If you did, you wouldn't say such things." But Tunde was undeterred. He took her hand and led her to his car, ignoring Dosun's warnings. They drove to a hotel nearby and booked a room. The hotel room was lavish, bathed in the soft glow of golden lights. A king-sized bed dominated the space, its silk sheets shimmering under the chandelier. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and something else, something faintly metallic, like the tang of blood. Tunde closed the door behind them, his heart racing. The woman stood in the center of the room, her back to him. She turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. There was something unsettling about her gaze, something that made Tunde's skin crawl, but he brushed the feeling aside. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice trembling with desire. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Names don't matter here," she replied. "Only the moment." Tunde stepped closer, his hands reaching for her. "Then let's make this moment unforgettable." The woman hesitated, her expression darkening. "We need to negotiate," she said, her voice cold. Tunde laughed, his confidence unshaken. "I don't care about money. I want you. Your beauty has captured me. I want you in my life forever and ever." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You don't know who I am," she whispered. "If you did, you'd run." Tunde's smile faltered. "I don't really care about your past. All that matters is that you are here with me now, and I love you." The lady was silent and stood still. Then Tunde, out of curiosity, said, "Tell me then, Who are you? The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small bottle filled with a strange shimmering liquid. Drink this, she said, her voice low and commanding. Then you'll see. Tunda stared at the bottle, his mind racing. The liquid inside swirled like molten gold, catching the light in a way that seemed almost hypnotic. He hesitated, but the woman's gaze held him captive. Tunda exhales and reluctantly said, "If it's from you," he said, his voice trembling, "I'll drink it." He uncorked the bottle and downed the liquid in one gulp. It burned his throat, and for a moment, the room seemed to tilt on its axis. He blinked, and when his vision cleared, he saw it. A massive snake coiled on the bed, its scales glistening like polished obsidian. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Tunda stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. What is this?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The snake hissed, its body uncoiling as it slid off the bed and onto the floor. Tunda turned and bolted for the door. He ran through the hotel corridors, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The snake pursued him relentlessly, its hisses echoing in the empty hallways. He stumbled down the stairs and into the street, the creature always just a step behind. He stumbled into his car, but the snake was already there, its forked tongue flicking in the darkness. He abandoned the car and ran through the city, his heart pounding in his chest. The snake pursued him relentlessly, its presence a constant terrifying shadow. The night stretched on, an endless nightmare of fear and exhaustion. When dawn finally broke, Tunda collapsed in the middle of the street, his body trembling and his mind shattered. A crowd gathered, their murmurs growing louder as they recognized him. Cameras flashed and reporters began to swarm. By midday, Tunda's face was plastered across every news outlet. The son of a prominent politician, found half-naked and delirious in the streets. His father's empire began to crumble under the weight of the scandal. Tunda was rushed to the hospital, where he drifted in and out of consciousness. When he finally woke, he saw a nurse standing by his bed. She turned to him, and his blood ran cold. It was her, the woman from the spa. Her eyes glinted with a sinister light as she leaned closer. Tunda tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was her smile, sharp and predatory. What happens next? Will Tunda escape the snake woman's grasp, or is he doomed to relive the nightmare? Stay tuned for part 2, where the story takes an even darker and more terrifying turn. Three weeks had passed since the night that shattered Tunda's life. The incident had left him a broken man, his reputation in ruins, and his father's empire teetering on the edge of collapse. The once proud son of a powerful politician was now a shadow of his former self, haunted by the memory of a woman who had turned his world upside down. Tunda sat at the dining table with his family, picking at his food. The air was heavy with unspoken tension. His father, Chief Adebayo, dropped his spoon abruptly, the clatter echoing through the room. "Tunde," his father said, his voice stern but laced with concern. "I need to know what happened that night. Tell us the truth." Tunda's mother, her eyes filled with worry, interjected. "Chief, please let him rest. He's been through enough." But Tunda couldn't bear the weight of their stares. He pushed his chair back and fled to his room, where he buried his face in a pillow, his body shaking with silent sobs. The memories of that night played on a loop in his mind, the shimmering liquid, the snake, the endless chase. He felt like a prisoner in his own mind, unable to escape the nightmare. Days turned into weeks, and Tunda tried to piece his life back together. But one evening, as he sat alone in his room, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and a chill ran down his spine as he answered. "Hello, Tunde," a voice purred on the other end. It was her, the snake woman. Tunda froze, his heart pounding. Hello? Who is this?" "It's me," she replied, her voice smooth and unnervingly calm. Tunde's breath hitched. "How did you get my number? Stay away from me. Don't ever call me again." He slammed the phone down, his hands trembling. A few days later, Tunde found himself at a quiet restaurant, hoping to clear his mind. He sat at a corner table, sipping a glass of wine, when he saw her, the snake woman, walking toward him. His heart raced, and he jumped to his feet, knocking over his chair. "Calm down, Tunde," she said, her voice soothing. "I won't bite you." Reluctantly, he sat back down, his eyes never leaving her. "What do you want from me?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Haven't you tormented me enough? No one believes me. They all think I'm mad." Tunde's anger flared. "What did I ever do to you? Why do you want to destroy my life? Tell me. What's going on? Why did you give me that potion? Why did you turn into a snake? Why did you chase me all night? And why are you here now?" The woman sighed, her expression softening. "Do you know why I'm here? Why I've been calling you? You blocked me everywhere, yet here you are, begging me for answers." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "You think I'm the villain in this story, don't you? But you have no idea what's really going on." "Then make me understand," Tunde pleaded, his voice cracking. "Every night I see that snake chasing me. I can't sleep. I can't eat. My life is falling apart because of you." She reached into her handbag and Tunde flinched, expecting another bottle of that cursed liquid. But instead, she pulled out a piece of paper. "This is my address," she said, sliding it across the table. "If you want answers, come when you're ready." Tunde stared at the paper, his mind a whirlwind of fear and curiosity. "How do I know this isn't another trap?" The woman stood, her eyes cold. "You don't. But if you want the truth, you'll come." Later that night, Tunde sat in his room, staring at the piece of paper. His mind was a battlefield of fear and curiosity. Was this a setup? Another scheme to ruin him? But the questions gnawed at him, demanding answers. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his car keys and stormed out of the house, his heart pounding. He jumped into his car and sped through the empty streets, the city lights blurring past him. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. The address was in a part of town he rarely visited, and the streets grew darker and more desolate as he approached. His mind raced with possibilities. What if she wasn't alone? What if this was a trap? But he pushed the thoughts aside, his need for answers outweighing his fear. He arrived at the apartment building, his heart pounding as he parked his car. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped out and approached the door. Tunde knocked on the door, but there was no answer. He pushed it open cautiously, stepping into a dimly lit apartment. The room was eerily quiet, the air thick with an unsettling stillness. "Hello? Hello? Anybody here?" But he was greeted with grave silence. Tunde's eyes darted around, taking in the clean, minimalist decor. But as he ventured further, he froze. There, in the kitchen, lay the lifeless body of the snake woman. Her eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Tunde's stomach churned, and he stumbled backward, his mind reeling. "No, no, no!" he muttered, his voice trembling. "This can't be happening!" He turned to leave, but as he reached the door, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police officers burst into the apartment, their guns drawn. "Freeze! Hands where we can see them!" one officer barked. Tunde's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation. "I'm innocent!" he shouted, his voice desperate. "I didn't do this!" But the officers didn't listen. They handcuffed him and led him away, the flashing lights of the police cars casting an ominous glow over the scene. As Tunde sat in the back of the police van, his mind raced. Was this a setup? Had he been framed? Or was it simply a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? The questions swirled in his mind, but one thing was clear. His nightmare was far from over. What happens next? Is Tunde innocent, or is there more to the story than meets the eye? Stay tuned for episode 3, where the tale takes an even darker and more unexpected turn. 2 months had passed since Tunde's arrest, and his fate hung in the balance. The media frenzy surrounding his case had reached a fever pitch. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's son accused of murder," and "The Pleasure Den mystery. Who killed Precious?" Tunde stood trial for a crime he couldn't explain, a crime no one believed he didn't commit. The public had already convicted him in their minds. To them, he was a spoiled rich kid who had snapped under the influence of drugs, strangling a young woman who had refused his advances. One afternoon, Tunde's sister, Abike, overheard a group of friends by the poolside discussing her brother's case as she walks by. "That guy is a murderer," one said confidently. "I heard he was high on drugs and killed that girl because she refused him. He'll rot in jail, and he deserves it." Abike's blood boiled. She stormed over, her drink in hand, and poured it over the man who had spoken. "You're all liars!" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "Why do you people always push false narratives? My brother is innocent. He didn't kill anyone. You'll see, he'll be vindicated." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding. But deep down, even she had questions. The next day, Abike visited Tunde in prison. The sight of her brother, once so vibrant and full of life, now haggard and broken, brought tears to her eyes. "Why are you doing this to us?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Since you came back, Daddy has had 2 heart attacks, and our company's stocks are crumbling. Is this your revenge for being sent abroad? Daddy gave you everything, and this is how you repay him?" Tunde's eyes filled with tears. "Abike, you know me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You know I'm innocent. I didn't kill anyone. I just need to find out what's really going on. I need to get to the bottom of this." Abike sighed, her anger giving way to despair. "But you can't get out, Tunde. This is a murder case. No amount of lobbying can get you bail. Daddy has exhausted all his connections. He's lost respect, credibility, everything." Tunde buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. A few days later, Tunde's lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Ransom, visited him. "Listen," she said, her tone firm. "I'm not your friend, and I'm not your sister. I'm your savior. But to save you, I need the truth. The whole truth. If you lie to me, I can't help you." Tunde nodded and began to recount the events of that fateful night. The pleasure den, the mysterious woman, the potion, the snake, the chase, and the horrifying discovery of Precious' body. Mrs. Ransom listened intently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she sighed heavily. "This case is going to be difficult to prove," she said. "There's no CCTV footage, no witnesses, no alibi. The best we can do is to try and get you out of here. I'll speak to your father and arrange a meeting with the judge." The meeting with the judge took place in secret, late at night, on the outskirts of town. "This is a serious case," the judge said, his voice low. "There's nothing I can do openly. But there is one way." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You can pay the warders to replace your son with another prisoner. Tunde will be smuggled out, and the replacement will remain on trial indefinitely. The media won't notice, and your son can leave the country. But he must never return, unless he undergoes facial surgery to change his appearance. This will cost you a lot of money, if we're going to keep it hidden. But I know you are capable." Mr. Adebayo felt a chill run down his spine. The plan was risky, unethical, dangerous, and expensive. But what choice did he have? A few days later, Tunde was blindfolded and led out of his cell. He was shoved into a black Mercedes SUV and driven to his family home. "Pack your bags," his father said as soon as he walked through the door. "We've arranged a private jet to take you back to the UK. You leave tonight." Tunde nodded numbly and went to his room to pack. But as he folded his clothes, his phone rang. It was Dosun, his childhood friend, the same friend that took him to the pleasure den. "I'm glad you're out," Dosun said, his voice tense. "But it'll be disappointing if you never find out what really happened. What if you go back to the UK and the nightmares continue?" "I have answers, Tunde. I know about the potion. I know what happened to Precious." Tunde froze. You knew all this time and didn't come forward. I've been smuggled out of prison like a fugitive, and you're just telling me this now. I've been investigating, Dosun replied, and now everything is clear. But I can't explain over the phone. You need to see for yourself. Tunde's mind raced. Where are you? I'm coming. As he hung up, Abakai walked in. What's going on? She asked, her eyes narrowing. I'm not giving up just like that, Tunde said firmly. Dosun knows what happened. I need to clear my name. I can't run away like a thief and become a fugitive in my own country for crimes I know nothing about. Abakai hesitated, then nodded. In that case, I'm coming with you. This sounds fishy. What if it's a setup? You could be walking into a trap here. No, Tunde said. You need to stay here and cover for me. If anyone asks, I'm still in my room, okay? Before she could argue, Tunde climbed out the back window and disappeared into the night. Tunde made his way through the dark streets, his heart pounding. He was halfway to the meeting point when a black Mercedes van screeched to a halt beside him. 3 masked men jumped out, grabbed him, and dragged him into the van. What do you want? Tunde shouted, struggling against their grip. You've got the wrong person. Let me go. But the men said nothing. They blindfolded him, and the van sped off into the night. Was this a setup? Was Dosun behind it all? What was his motive? And what secrets lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered? Stay tuned for episode 4, where the truth behind the mystery begins to unravel, and Tunde's fight for justice takes a darker, more dangerous turn. Tunde woke up in a dimly lit room, his head throbbing and his hands bound tightly behind his back. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint smell of mildew. He blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness, but the room was shrouded in shadows, the only light coming from a small crack under the door. Where am I? He muttered, his voice hoarse and barely audible. The last thing he remembered was being dragged into a black van by masked men. He had shouted, struggled, and pleaded, but they had ignored him, their faces hidden behind dark cloth. Now, he was here, wherever here was. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was one of the masked men, his eyes cold and unreadable. He carried a lantern, its flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Who are you? Tunde demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. What do you want from me? The man didn't answer. Instead, he placed the lantern on the floor and left, locking the door behind him. Tunde's mind raced. Was this about the murder accusation? Was it connected to the mysterious woman from the pleasure den? Or was it something else entirely? Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Tunde couldn't tell. The kidnappers brought him food and water, but refused to speak to him. His mind began to play tricks on him, blurring the line between reality and illusion. One night, the door opened again, and a familiar figure stepped inside. It was Abakai, his sister. Tunde's eyes widened in shock. Abakai, what are you doing here? Did they kidnap you too? Please tell me you didn't follow me to the alleyway. Abakai smiled, but it wasn't the warm, reassuring smile Tunde remembered. It was cold, calculating. No, Tunde, she said, her voice calm and steady. I'm not a prisoner here. I'm the one who arranged all of this. Tunde stared at her, his mind struggling to process her words. What are you talking about? This isn't funny, Abakai. It's not a joke, she replied, her tone sharp. You think you're the victim in all of this, but you're not. You're the reason our family is falling apart. Abakai stepped closer, her eyes blazing with anger. Do you have any idea what you've done? You came back from abroad, thinking you could just waltz in and take over Daddy's empire. But you didn't care about the consequences. You didn't care about the people you hurt along the way. Tunde shook his head, confused. What are you talking about? I didn't hurt anyone. Didn't you? Abakai snapped. What about the woman at the pleasure den? What about Ajoke? You think her death was just a coincidence? Tunde, you're a fool. Why would you drink a strange liquid from someone you never met, just because you wanted to sleep with her? She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. The potion you drank wasn't just a hallucinogen. It was a binding spell. It connected you to the spirit world, making you vulnerable to their influence. The snake woman, the chase, the murder. It was all designed to break you, to make you pay for what you've done. Right now, you are far from reality. Tunda's heart pounded as the pieces began to fall into place. But why? Why would you do this to me? Abike's voice softened, but her eyes remained cold. You don't remember, do you? When we were kids, you were always Daddy's favorite. He sent you abroad, gave you everything, while I was left here to pick up the pieces. And then, when you came back, you didn't even notice how much I'd done to keep the family together. You just waltzed in, expecting to take over everything, acting all bossy and pushing everybody around. She paused, her hands trembling with suppressed emotion. But that's not even the worst part. Do you remember the night you went to the pleasure den? Do you remember what you did? Tunda frowned, trying to recall. I didn't do anything. I just went there to relax. Abike shook her head. You met Ajoke that night. She wasn't just a random woman. She was my friend. And you hurt her. You didn't even realize it, but you destroyed her life. And then you were meant to walk away, like it was nothing. Tunda's mind reeled as her words sank in. He had been so caught up in his own world that he hadn't noticed the pain he was causing. But before he could respond, the door opened again and the masked men returned. Abike turned to leave, but Tunda called out to her. Abike, wait. You can't do this. I'm your brother. She paused in the doorway, her back to him. You stopped being my brother the moment you forgot about me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she walked out, leaving Tunda alone with his captors. Then a ray of light flashed by his eyes. Ogre, shut up, you're making noise, one of the kidnappers barked, his voice gruff. Another figure, their boss, stepped forward. What's the issue? He asked, his tone commanding. The first kidnapper shrugged. He's been talking to himself, shouting, Abike, Abike, Abike. This guy's mind is really messed up for good. I think he's hallucinating again. The boss laughed, a low, menacing sound. We need to hurry things up before he finally runs mad in this place. Nobody will pay that kind of ransom for a raving mad son. Tund cried profusely, realizing that he had been hallucinating. There was no Abike. His sister had not visited him. He was all alone in the kidnapper's den. Yet amidst his despair, he felt a strange relief, knowing that his sister was not part of this chaos. Days passed and the situation grew more dire. Tunda's father, overwhelmed by stress, collapsed while walking down the stairs in their mansion. He was rushed to the hospital, where he lay weak and pale, his spirit broken. Tunda's lawyer visited him in the hospital, her face filled with worry. Chief, she said, her voice trembling, I understand you're not well, but this is a serious issue. The judge called me and he's furious. He's threatening hell and thunder if this ever leaks to the media. He said he will deny any involvement and make sure we all pay for failing so dearly and making a mockery of his kindness to help your son escape. The family has been thrown into further chaos. Tunde, who was meant to be in prison, was now held in a kidnapper's den. They couldn't go to the police and they couldn't make it public. They were at a crossroads with very limited options. Some days later, the family received a call from the kidnappers. It was their boss, his voice cold and intimidating. Listen carefully, he said. We want you to package 100 million naira in cash. Once you have the money, call us. If you don't do as you're told, or you try to act smart, forget about ever seeing your son again. Before they could respond, he hung up. At the kidnapper's den, Tunde was a shadow of his former self. He couldn't distinguish between what was real and what wasn't. He refused to eat or beg, his spirit broken, but his mind still searching for a way out. He began to befriend one of the younger kidnappers, a boy who seemed less hardened than the others. Tunde promised him 2 million naira if he helped him escape. The boy agreed, but warned Tunde that they were expecting a visitor in 3 days. After that, the boy said, we can make our move. Tunde's curiosity was piqued. Who is this visitor? The boy shook his head. I don't know. I've never seen him before, but the boss says he's the one who gave us this job. 3 days later, the young kidnapper returned, his face pale with fear. "Tonight's the night," he whispered. "We'll make our move after midnight. Be ready." Tunda's heart pounded as the hours dragged by. Finally, the boy returned, a knife in his hand. He cut Tunda's bonds and helped him to his feet. "Stay close," he said, his voice trembling, "and don't make a sound." They crept through the dark corridors of the kidnapper's den, their footsteps barely audible. But just as they reached the door, a voice rang out. "Where do you think you're going?" It was the boss, his face twisted with rage. He raised his gun and fired, the shot echoing through the night. The young kidnapper crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Tunda screamed, but the boss grabbed him, shoving him back into the room. "You think this is a game?" the boss snarled. "This isn't Nollywood. This gun is real. If you try anything stupid again, you'll end up like him." The next day, the kidnappers were in high spirits. The boss gathered them together, his face lit with excitement. "Today's the day," he announced. "The family has the money. We'll be rich by tonight." The men cheered, their guns clinking together as they celebrated their impending payday. But Tunde sat in silence, his mind galloping. He knew his family wouldn't give up without a fight. Unbeknownst to the kidnappers, Tunda's family had hatched a clever plan. As the kidnappers prepared for the ransom drop, Tunda sat in his cell, his heart pounding. He didn't know what was coming, but he prayed they didn't get away with it. He had a sense of tension, of impending chaos. The boss walked in, a smug smile on his face. "Get ready, Tunde. You're going home." What will happen during the ransom drop? Will Tunda's family's plan succeed, or will the kidnappers outsmart them? And who is the mysterious visitor behind all of this? Stay tuned for the next part, where the story takes an even darker and more dramatic turn. Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. See you in the next episode.